What's going on YouTube? This is JabberTech, and right here is the LG V40 ThinQ in 2019. This is a beautiful device. I can say this is their best V series to date, with a few caveats. There's some things that I just don't like, but let's get into this review of the LG V40 ThinQ. This is it, guys. This beautiful phone right here is the LG V40, and it does a really cool color shift effect that I personally can't get enough of. Sometimes my phone is blue, sometimes my phone is black. It all depends on how the light hits it, and I think that's something super cool. But this is the US T-Mobile edition. Some of your specs might be a little bit different overseas, but the main specs that you want to know, especially here in the US, it has a Snapdragon 845 processor with 6 gigabytes of RAM. Internally, you have 64 gigs of storage, but you also have a micro SD card slot for expansion, so boosting that up is no problem whatsoever. The battery is a 3300 milliamp hour battery. You have two front-facing selfie cameras on the front, a standard and a wide. On the back is where you have this 3-camera array, from telephoto, standard to super wide. Of course, there's a rear-mounted capacitive fingerprint scanner. You have wireless charging, Qualcomm's Quick Charge 3.0, as well as support for USB-C Power Delivery 2.0. Quad DAC with this headphone jack is awesome. The bottom firing speaker is pretty loud, but then again, the whole back of the phone is a resonance chamber for that speaker, and I'll talk about that a bit later, but that makes this phone really, really loud, one of the loudest ones that I've heard personally. And the panel on the front is a 6.4-inch OLED panel that's a 1440 by 3120. That gives you roughly 537 ppi, and it is HDR10 compatible, Dolby Vision, so it's a beautiful looking panel. And then the front and the back of this phone is covered in Gorilla Glass 5, guys. So you're getting some really nice specs here. Now it is a fingerprint magnet, as you can see, but popping on a super cool case like this Nimbus 9 case is going to get rid of those fingerprints and just give you an overall sleek looking fun phone to use. And I'm a really big fan of a flat panel screen, guys. I'm kind of over the curved screens from other manufacturers. I think a flat panel just makes more sense, at least in my opinion. What do you guys think down below? But for watching multimedia, for using your phone in direct sunlight, you don't get that glare at the edge. And while the curved screen looks cool, I think a flat panel is just more useful and just better feeling in the hand. You can kind of grip it nicely. Now, there are a few things that I don't like about this phone, and one of those things is definitely not this animated wallpaper. I just have to mention that before it actually starts raining, and then you won't be able to see this. But the animated lock screen is something I think is really cool. So whether it's raining or snowing, you get a nice animation here. And it's just something that I've always appreciated from LG. They kind of give you those little things that make you smile. But I want to talk about some things that I don't like about this phone. And the first thing I don't like is this being a V series phone. HDMI out does not work with it. So if you get a cable and you try and use HDMI out, it's going to tell you that you have to plug in a Chromecast or a Miracast capable device. Now, some of you have said with the Unlocked Edition that you received an update that actually reversed this and you do have HDMI out. Well, as of right now on the T-Mobile Edition, I have not gotten any update. So hopefully with Android Pie that will update this, because my G8 from T-Mobile has HDMI out enabled. So once that's enabled, this will not be a negative for this phone. Another thing I want to mention, guys, is that this screen is beautiful, but out of the box, they only keep it at 1080p. Now, that's not really a big deal. All you have to do is go into settings and boost that up to 1440. But what I do want to mention, and why this is a con and not a plus, because the screen really is beautiful, is if you leave it at 1440, sadly the 3300 milliamp hour battery is not going to make it throughout the entire day. Whereas if I leave it at 1080, I can clearly make it through the entire day, into the next day really, but I do have to charge it that next day. But the point being, at 1080, this is going to be an all-day phone, and it's never left me stranded whatsoever. But at 1440, I am keeping an eye out for that charger. So that being said, guys, whether you leave it at 1080 or 1440, it's up to you. I personally just leave it at 1080 because I'd prefer to have an all-day battery life. But if you want that higher resolution, by all means, go for it. It's a beautiful, beautiful looking panel. Just know that you probably will have to charge it at work or in the car on the way home, just so that you're not looking for a charger by dinner time. That's just a plus and a negative, I guess. The battery life, if it was boosted up to like a 36, even 4,000, I think this would be a 2-day phone. But as of right now, it's really not. Next thing I want to talk about is the UI. I think LG really needs a refresh on their overall look and feel for their phones. It's something that reminds me of LG's from years past. They really haven't done all that much to kind of spruce this up, to kind of bring it into the modern day. And that's evident with the fact that their app drawer really doesn't alphabetize things automatically. So if you download a new app, it'll put it at the end of the list and you have to go in and select sort apps alphabetically and then it'll do it. It's just something that I think they should have included from the beginning, from the get. It should be something when you download an app, it automatically sorts itself out without any extra steps from the user. And also you do have this sort of animation lag here for their overview screen. Just take a look. It takes a little bit of a second here, and that's something that I don't think is acceptable. Some of you have said go in and disable animations. I know about that settings, guys, but why would I do that? That's like buying a turbo Porsche and only going 40 miles an hour. You have a phone that's capable of doing something. The 845 processor is more than capable. You just have to fine-tune your UI to take advantage of that, and I don't think LG is doing that. So the UI, I think, could use a little refresh, guys. And you might be asking, what about dark theme? Well, they actually call that high contrast for some reason. So if you enable this, that is like your dark mode, and it'll just change all the settings to a dark theme. So thankfully, they are in the modern era, they are in the modern age, and gave us a dark theme. Thumbs up to LG for that. And that brings me to the next point about LG. Back in August of 2018, they said we're developing this whole update center to make Android updates suck less. I believe that's what they said verbatim, guys. Well, we're in May right now. Pretty much every other manufacturer has pushed an Android Pie update, and I'm still on 8.1. I don't really know what their update center is doing. I think there might be like 2 people there, and they just play video games all day, but they're not really updating their phones. I think it's unacceptable for LG to have a flagship device like this V series and not update it. They really need to step up their game in terms of updates. Now, for some of you, updates are not a big deal. For some of you, you just keep updates sitting there, piling up, waiting for you. But I like updates, but I also like things that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So maybe LG's in that camp, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They actually did a really good job. There's no lag. There's no issues with this software. They really did an awesome job. It's very speedy, no issues whatsoever. So maybe we'll get Pi in another couple months. They're saying June-ish. So when it does come out, I will be happy to see it. Now let's talk about this notch. It's really not on the plus or it's not on the negative. Some of you might think it's a negative. Some of you might think it's a not. For me, I have no problem with the notch. I was not about this notch life before. I've complained about notches. But honestly, this is one of the less egregious notches that I've seen. It's something that once you get used to, it's not really a big deal. And LG did a nice implementation of it. But if you don't like that notch, guys, all you have to do is go into the settings, and they call it a new second screen for some reason. They don't call it the notch settings, but you can change it. So you can kind of change the colors if you wanted to. So you can have some sort of rainbow look. You can have some gradients there. So if you really don't like that notch, there is a way to get rid of it. And as you can see, you can kind of square off the corners or you can round them. But really, guys, that's just like a waste. I think it looks a little silly this way. So I would just leave it as is. You will get used to it and it's not really a big deal. But there are some settings here if you really can't stand this notch. For me, it's not a problem at all. And that's pretty much it in terms of my con list, guys. There's not that much that I don't like about this phone. Most of this phone is super awesome. So let's talk about the awesomeness of this phone, starting with the Google Assistant key. Now, for some of you, you might say that's a gimmick. You don't want a hardware button. Now, unless you've ever used a phone with a Google Assistant key on it or with the squeeze feature, you don't know how awesome this is, guys. And it works whether the screen is off or whether the screen is on. It just makes it super simple to ask it things like, what's the name of that song? What's the weather? And it will give you more personalized results when you unlock it. And that's something that I think is super cool. Not to mention, double tapping on it brings up Google Lens right away. So if you have something in front of you, and I was just on vacation, I use Google Lens to translate whatever is in front of me because obviously I don't speak that language. I speak American, I speak English. So the Google Lens feature came in super handy. And that's one thing that if you haven't used it in the past, you will use it on a more daily basis once you have a dedicated key for it. I touched on this a little bit earlier, guys. The screen is something that I think is a beautiful panel. LG really did a great job with this OLED panel. It does not leave me wanting for anything. The colors are really vibrant. They're really bright. It works in direct sunlight without any issues, and it gets dim enough, whereas if you're checking your phone in the middle of the night, it doesn't really wake you up. And LG did a great job kind of hiding this notch. So if you see the original video, that's the size of it. And if you extend it, they actually stopped it right before the notch. So that means that your video does not get interrupted. Whatever you're looking at does not get interrupted by that notch. And I think that's a great way. I think most companies with a notch should do that. But the screen itself is awesome, guys. And another thing that's really awesome is the sound. Now let's just give you a sample of the sound. The sound is really loud on this phone, guys, and that's one thing that I want to mention, that since I've gotten this phone, I've been using my Bluetooth speaker a lot less these days because all I do mostly is listen to podcasts or listen to a couple songs while I'm at work or while I'm at home, and I really don't find the need to plug in a Bluetooth speaker. If you place this phone on a flat surface, as you heard, it gets really, really loud, and if you're just listening to a podcast or if you're just making dinner or you're doing something and you don't really want to turn on your Bluetooth speaker, you're really not going to have to do that with this. And that's something that I think is really innovative, and LG has always been super innovative in my opinion. And this is one way that they are trying to push the limits and kind of give us new ideas and refresh the phone, because phone is like getting a little bit stale, guys. It's really hard to differentiate from one manufacturer to the next. But one way LG did it is by making that resonance chamber on the inside. So well done for that. Another way they've done it, and no one's really touching on this, guys, is the quad DAC. Now, I don't use headphones, wired headphones on a daily basis, but when I do, I'm always impressed by plugging this in. The sound output from this headphone jack is one of the best in the business, and they've done a great job innovating, kind of pushing what we want from a phone, giving us more features than the average bear, and I thank LG for that. That's why I think they deserve a little bit more credit. It does have an always-on screen as well, guys. That's not really a plus or a minus. It's a very, very functional always-on display. You can slide through and get access to quick toggles, and you can actually change the always-on display, and they give you a ton of different ways to change it. Let me just show you some of those ways. There's like at least 30 different ways you can change it. If you go into one setting, you just keep swiping and you see different variations of it, and then you can change up the color down here. So you really have a lot of options if you wanted to. You can even put an animated wallpaper or just a regular picture of your own if you wanted to. So let me just show you. You have some of them here and you can download a bunch of them. You get a little bit of an animation going on. So you can have a lot of fun with this always-on display. I personally don't use the always-on display as much as I should, but this is actually a really good one. And it doesn't take up that much battery life. It probably takes up a tiny, tiny portion. But if you are someone that really want to know the basics, this is it. And this is really enjoyable. You have facial unlock here as well, which is pretty fast. And let me just see if it'll work from behind the camera. There we go. It just unlocked with no issue. And then you have a fingerprint scanner, an actual capacitive. Now, it's not the fastest in the world, but it does the job, and it is like 99% accurate, especially when compared to under the glass ones. So no issues with that at all. And now the main thing we want to talk about, guys, is the camera. We're all here for cameras. This is what phones have come down to these days, is the camera. And the camera app is probably one of the best in the business. They give you a ton of options, especially if you're a manual shooter. You can shoot stills or video in manual mode and have access to just about everything. And if you even want to shoot in 18:9, it's here, guys. Even though no one's really doing that, you do have the option. So it is kind of future-proof. You have Cine Video, so you can zoom in on a certain part of your video without actually having to move the entire phone. It'll just automatically zoom in on that portion. That's something pretty cool. Another cool feature of this phone is called CineShot, guys. So as you can see, I was at the mall and I just animated the aquarium there, and that's something you can do, although it only gives you about 6 seconds of video. I really wish they'd given you a little bit more. Portrait mode on this phone is pretty good. It's not one of the best, but it's a fun camera to use, and they give you some nice shots. Of course, wide angle is where it's at. The wide angle is something that LG's pioneered and something that they've kept on their phones, so I'm really happy to see the wide angle. Overall, that's what I have to tell you guys. If you take nothing else from this camera and just take a look at these shots, it's a fun camera to use. It's very capable. camera, although sometimes it might take you 1 or 2 tries to get the perfect shot if you actually take your time to set it up. But if you do that, you're going to get some nice quality shots here. It's not the overall best. It's not the one-shot killer like the Pixel phones. Sometimes you take a shot and you're like, whoa, what happened there? It's blurry, it's out of focus. But just take your time with it and it'll be a fun, capable shooter. No issues with that. You have recording up to UHD at 60 frames per second. This is a test in 4K. Walking down some steps, see how the stabilization is, see what the microphone is like. See what it picks up. And now finally, this is 4K, 60 frame second, wide angle, just because. Now in the 4K 60 frame a second, you only get 6-minute maximum timing, 6-minute maximum recording. So it is what it is, but at least you're getting 60 frames a second. And already through the viewfinder, this is looking a little bit better. Of course, we won't know until we check it out later on. LG is just, you know, pretty good, guys. Big fan of the underdog LG. I'm rooting for them. No diggity. But, of course, quality is quality. You can't argue with it. We'll see what this looks like. See how much wind noise is being picked up. See how the mics are doing. Etc., etc. There's a boat going through. Pretty cool. Now this is 1080p recording, also 60 frames per second. As we walk down these steps, check out the microphone quality, see what it's like. Go from the shadows to the light, and then open up into a big scene. Just to check it out. Let's continue on, and then we'll check out another mode as well. But so far, looking at the viewfinder, it actually looks pretty good. No complaints from the viewfinder. We'll have to see what it looks like afterwards, and of course on the computer, just to check it out, see how much noise is being picked up, etc., etc. And now this is the same test but in wide angle, just to check out what the quality's like with this wide angle camera. See what it's picking up, see what it's not picking up, check how it is in the shadows, etc., etc. So far on the viewfinder, I'm thinking it's not as crisp, but that's always the case with these wide angle secondary or tertiary lenses. Now I'm not using a gimbal, obviously. I'm just holding it like you would if you were on vacation, such as I am, and you want to take some video. So let's go ahead and see what the quality's like. Now we open up to this widescreen glory. Not bad. Always been a fan of LG and their wide angle lenses. That's something super cool. The front camera is only at 1080, guys, so you don't get that ultra recording from the front camera, but it's okay. It's still a decent front facing camera. The sound quality coming from the videos is awesome as well. No issues with that. It's really a fun shooter, capable shooter, definitely above average type of camera in my opinion. Last thing, phone quality. A lot of you want to know, no issues with the phone quality, either hearing the person or speaking to the person. It was very clear. No issues with this. Speakerphone was definitely loud, guys. So that's really been it. I hope you enjoyed this review, guys. I hope it kind of helped you out. If you are interested in picking this phone up, check my links down below where you can get a pretty great deal on this phone. And if you snag this for $500 or less, that's going to be the deal of the year. You're going to be really happy with it. I can almost guarantee it. I'm super happy with this V40 myself. And I think LG deserves a little bit more recognition in the press, in the media, and they deserve your hard-earned cash as well because it is a all-capable, fun phone to use. But I really appreciate you watching. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time.